Good evening, it's 5:30 PM. I'll call to order the regular meeting for the Fargo Board of Education, Tuesday, June 25th. Is there a motion for approval of the agenda?
Yeah, I'd like to move approval of the agenda with the addition of an HR addendum under item 6B on the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, there's a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying yes.
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 Motion passes. We are having a guest report this evening from the Fargo Youth Initiative, and Brandy serves as the liaison to that organization, so you are going to do an introduction, right?
Yes, I sure am. I have Tate Fisher here, and he is going to go through what they did at Impact Fargo. These kids have done a lot of work, and he is going to show us exactly the day and what everything was, basically what they did that day of Impact Fargo. It was super cool. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yes, it is. There we go. Hi. Thank you for having me. As Brandy said, I'm Tate Fisher. I am the co-chair of the Fargo Youth Initiative. The other co-chair is Martha Denton, also from Fargo North. So just a little bit about us. Our mission statement for Fargo Youth Initiative is empowering the voice and uniting the youth of Fargo through actions and teamwork. How we do this is generally because we are a part of the city government, and so naturally we get ties with various city organizations. I think it's Tuesdays or Thursdays every month we had a meeting with one group. Like one day it was the YWCA. There's just like various sects of Fargo that talk to us about what they do and how they do that. And so having us actually youth be a part of that was part of that. And our vision is creating an atmosphere where youth have a positive, sustainable impact on the community of Fargo. We have three main functions. We serve as a liaison between the city of Fargo and the youth of Fargo. We investigate needs, problems, and issues affecting the youth of Fargo. And we research issues and make policy and project recommendations to the Fargo City Commission. And most of these we accomplish through this PowerPoint right here. We have 15 total members, 6 from North, 6 from Davies, 2 from South. And this year we finally had a member from a private school. We had 1 member from Shanley High School, which we're really proud of that. We would like to see more, South High kids involved in Fargo Youth Initiative, but sometimes it's just hard to advertise these sort of things. We already had our round of applications come in, and we've already approved new members. I'm not sure what the new numbers are right now, but yes. So Impact Fargo is a youth-led conference that we put on every April-May. The previous ones are up there. 2016 was the first year. It was hosted at the Fargo Theater, and we had Cam Knutson, the Kilborn Group, Jody Reagan of TEDx, just a lot of. And then we had Project Cute, which is a local student organization from Davies. One of the members actually became a member of FYI the next year. And that was our first one, and we had around 50 students in attendance, but it was a nice sort of landing point for us to start on. The next year was our biggest year, 2017. We had it at NDSU in the Union Theater. We had Caitlin Dargan, if you know her, she's a freelance photographer. Lauren Singleman from NDSU, who's done a lot of work encouraging girls and women to get enrolled and become into STEM. I don't know how to phrase that. Lindsay Flory of Bonanzaville, the History Museum out in West Fargo, and Imagine Thriving, a mental health group in Fargo. We had 150 students in there, but most of them were from Davies and North. And that was also because of the dynamic of the group that year. And then the next year, 2018, we had it at the Sanctuary Event Center, just down the street. We had Brittany Ingebrigtsen and Janelle Regenball from Youth Court, Annie Wood from Emergent Prairie, Mukai Selekwa from Webelin, tech startup in Fargo, and then Joe Burgum of Folkways and the Red River Market. And that year we had around 120 students, and it was only Davies and North students. This past year, we had, on April 15th, in the City Commission chambers, our theme was the future of Fargo. We were focusing on how us as youth can impact the future of Fargo. And the special thing about Impact Fargo is it's not only enriching to the students who are involved. We have great speakers at Impact Fargo, but we also have a section called a Power Half Hour, where we ask students students, participants, what they like and what they dislike and what they change about Fargo, and we're going to get into those results pretty soon here. Our speakers for this last year were pretty good. We had an opening introduction from the mayor, Tim Mahoney. We had Chelsea Ewan from the Arts Partnership. We had Representative Joshua Boshi, the House Minority Leader, Rachel Stone of P's and Q's Etiquette, and Fred Edwards, who is a spoken word artist from North Minneapolis. Just a variety of different people from all different backgrounds. And it was really astounding to see how the participants reacted to all of these people. It was a great time. But what I'm really here to talk about is the Power Half Hour. So this is more specifically into the Power Half Hour. So students were split into different groups, 6 total, following the whole rainbow. And we asked them, as members of FYI, questions about what they liked, disliked, what they'd like to change, etc. And we wrote their responses on the boards, and then we compiled all of those responses into a Google Doc, and then kind of just summed them all up. Because there's a lot of repeats. One year we had a lot of people asking for a drive-in movie theater, which was, we couldn't really follow through on that because it's a lot. Anyway, so these are some things they liked about Fargo. They enjoy all of the outdoor events. Streets Alive, Street Fair, Red River Market, Frostal, Fargo Marathon, Rib Fest, etc., etc. They like it when they can go outside, which makes sense because for the most of the year we are inside, either in school or in our houses because it's too cold outside. They really liked the new updated all-in-one recycling. They liked how, despite like it's being a growing city, it's sort of maintained its small town feel. Like it still feels relatively like, you know, like you don't say Fargo and you go, ooh, that's a very big city. You kind of hear like, okay, this sounds like a small community, and I like that. They like the parks. I'm not sure specifically what parks they liked because they came from different backgrounds, but parks. They liked the amount of opportunities they were given in school and in the community in both athletic and academic sectors. And they liked, to quote, the good family vibe that Fargo has. You can kind of see that in the downtown, but what they really wanted to change, where they wanted more events, which makes sense. They wanted more outdoor concerts and festivals in Fargo because I think we don't really have too many. They wanted more winter events because obviously most of the outdoor events, people like them because they're in the summer and they can enjoy themselves, so why not have something similar in the winter? They like the idea of having art festivals where students can show off their art outside of even like a scholastic sort of zone, like in the public. They like the idea of pop-up restaurants, and they really just want, if we have the events, they want people to market more to youth, like aggressively, like really hammering down on showing us what opportunities we have. Because sometimes in school we get people either miss announcements, they are sick a day, or something happens and nothing gets through. And so what they like to see is they like to see how many opportunities we actually have. Because I know that there is a lot, and not all of it actually comes through to the students. And so that's obviously something they wanted. They also wanted to make downtown a safer place overall. So obviously lighting is always a way to make something safer, either in the alleys, in the streets, etc., especially in the alleys because there's very little back there. They want more spaces for minors downtown after dark because I think like the latest businesses are always going to be the bars, the 21 plus areas. And whereas like the coffee houses, the stores, all of that shut down pretty early in the evening. And they also like to see more trees and fauna, which makes sense during the hot summer. Sometimes you just want a little bit of shade. I remember just recently, personal anecdote, I was driving down a street and I was like, wow, there's a lot of trees. This is very nice. That's something they want to see as well. And they want to see a lot of diversity of culture as well, because I think most of us appreciate like the different ethnic communities that Fargo has to offer, but rarely do we ever really celebrate those. And so obviously a public celebration would be nice, but I could also think of like in-school celebrations as well, just like having a day of like a culture festival or something like that. Those sort of ideas are what they came up with, pretty much unprompted. So in the future, we plan to try to have near equal representation from all Fargo schools, including Oak Grove, Shanley, and Woodrow. We continue research on top needs of youth in Fargo through guest speakers and studies and et cetera. Hopefully this year we can hammer down on that more. We want to implement more initiatives beyond Impact Fargo. We want to try to, because we've talked a lot with other agencies, but we haven't exactly made a move with one yet. And so we'd love to partner with an actual agency on issues such as like mental health or sort of stuff like that. Policy research, like I think we had a small movement where we were like, hey, maybe we could campaign to lower the voting age in Fargo, stuff like that. We really want to shift our focus sort of away from Impact Fargo. Impact Fargo has been a useful tool for us for gauging what the youth want, but at the same time, it takes a lot of effort to put on. We start planning it around in January, and that soaks up a lot of our schedule. And so having other events besides Impact Fargo would definitely help us like take a breather from the sort of humdrum of, okay, Impact Fargo every year. But that sort of thing. And then we also want to do other events, like there's talk of an art show that we want to put on. There's service projects. There's a lot we can do that we're hoping to do this next year. And of course, we want to collaborate with city officials. This includes the school board. We are open to helping in any way. So we're open to, queries, all of that sort of stuff. So if you have any input for us, we'd love to hear it. We do have an email, and I am also right here. So obviously, like most of the stuff's been planned already, but we are always open for new projects and new things to do the next coming year. So I'm going to pose the question, is there anything we can do for you in this next coming year? Okay, any questions? I kind of went through that kind of fast, but yeah.
Fantastic presentation. You're a breath of fresh air. Robin, I saw that you had your hand up, and then Jennifer, okay.
I have questions and comments. First of all, a little bit of history on how this initiative started and why the school board is involved. It was started under Melissa Sobolik when she was a city commissioner and Dan Molly when he was a city planner. And the reason the school board is involved is because it was going to be called the Fargo Youth Commission, which is my organization. And Brad Wimmer called me and said, you need to get on this board, Robin, because we need some representation. So I was on that formative board, and you guys are doing awesome work. I think the purpose of this is to bring youth voice to city elected officials. So you're doing an awesome job. Let's see here. Let us know if you have any ideas on some alliances. I would be happy to help make those connections. Tell me this, at all schools, are your events excused events to participate in?
Yes. We have to, the way it works is obviously it has to start out parent excused.
Okay.
And then as the day goes on, we have 3 checkpoints. So we have one when they get there, and then one during the lunch break, which this year was nice. We kept it in the chambers, so we didn't have to they didn't really leave. They just kind of ate there. And then we had one at the end. So we had 3 different checkpoints. If they failed, like let's say they show up to the first one, but then during their lunch break, they leave. They are not excused. We made sure of this. Everyone was fine. I don't think we actually had a case like that, but just in case it did come up, we had those checkpoints. So they got excused at the end of the day. And this is especially important. I can't speak today.
You're doing
important
great.
for students who have, like seniors who have exemptions. This is especially important for them. And so that's more, like in our first years, it was more like we tried to get it senior exempt. And then I think this past year was exempt for most students. I'll have to actually check, but I'm pretty sure it was.
2 more questions. So
Okay.
you are referred through school administration to be on this initiative or this board?
Yeah, I forgot to talk about the process. So applications, we kind of changed it this year because usually applications, we accept them in the fall, like September, August, and then we go through them, and then we actually allow the student, like tell who's on and who's off in October. This year we decided to do it earlier in the year so that they could be on FYI from the get-go, basically. So this year we accepted, I'm pretty sure around, would you say like 15?
I think you're correct. I think it was 15 or 16
15 or
reviewed.
Yeah. 15 or 16 applicants, and this year we didn't have a rubric in previous years, and so we basically renovated the process to make it more easier to figure out who would actually be a good fit, because sometimes when you read an application, you see the words, but you're like, is this actually answering the question we're trying to answer? So we came up with a 5-point rubric. Each of these points had 5 points attached to them, and then based off of their score, they were either yes or no. It was kind of like a ranking. And so this year I think we accepted
Seven, I think.
Seven kids, 7 students from various schools in the area. It took a while to go through all of them, but that's sort of our process. It's an application process, and me, Martha, Brandy, and our advisor, Catlin, of the city planning, went through every application during the day. And
One last question. Is Skip your dad?
yes,
Tell him hello.
I will. All right.
Jennifer.
So actually, Robin answered, or asked and answered many of the questions that I had written down too, but I do have a couple additional. Do you have, when you say that you accept 7, is that in addition to the 15, or are you all seniors? And so these will be the 7 new board members moving forward, or?
Yeah, these students are FYIs of all grade levels. We
Okay.
have representatives in every grade, which is something we are really good at this year. I think we only have, it's me, Martha, and one other student or 2 other students that are actually graduating.
Morgan?
Yeah, Morgan, and then I think 3 from Davies. And so we basically fill those spots, and then we see if there's room to add or remove some people. It depends on the year, of course. I think this next year it's going to be around. It usually floats somewhere in the realm of 15 to 20 people per year, of various grade levels. It kind of prevents everyone leaves. Now we don't have anyone who was ever on a previous year. So we always try to mix up the grades and all of that. So
And then, how often do you meet?
we used to meet every 2 weeks, but now we meet once a month. The official meetings are 7 p.m. Sundays usually, and we have our lunch meetings. I guess we meet twice a month. Then we have our lunch meetings where we listen to a presentation. I think every first Tuesday of the month.
I think you're doing some fabulous work, and you did mention ideas around collaboration in which businesses. You mentioned mental health, you mentioned policy research, as well as collaboration with the school board. Have you had any deeper conversations as a group in terms of what that might look like?
At the beginning of the year, school year, I guess, so in September, we had sort of one big meeting, talking about, okay, what is it that FYI really wants to accomplish? And those were discussed then, but then it kind of fell into we have to focus on Impact Fargo. And then, so that's what we're trying to avoid this next coming year, is we're trying to actually do more projects outside of Impact Fargo. And so this next year I'm looking to see, I'm not going to be on FYI, obviously, but I'm looking to see FYI actually teaming up with other groups and actually putting on an event, or it doesn't even have to be a service project or something, like a campaign that would happen. We want to see more of that rather than just Impact Fargo.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That's great. Thank you.
thank you.
Brandy?
I can elaborate that on a little bit too. They want to do a lot more volunteer work, where they can take off, part of the day and go out and pick up garbage. They did mention suicide awareness was another huge one for them, because they know amongst their students that there is those issues. So I think it's a great thing to have these guys, because they know exactly what their prior students are doing and what they're thinking of. So yeah, I really have enjoyed working with these guys. This was my 3rd year, and they're very smart and very positive students to work for. So thank you, Tate.
Thank you.
John?
Did I hear that you graduated this year?
Yes, I graduated this year.
From which school did you graduate?
Fargo North.
From Fargo North, okay. Not to put you on the spot, but what were your likes and top wants from Fargo Public Schools in your experience?
Okay. Likes this year. Okay, I'm gonna have to think a little bit. Wants I can get to. I think So Davies, I think halfway through the year, Davies initiated this cutlery plan with the metal cutlery. I heard didn't go that well, and I think one thing that my friend group at least wanted was like, see what happens if we did this at North. I understand that was kind of like a test trial, but obviously with all of the current stuff that's going on with climate change, with all of that, we would love to see that at North, and I can think of a lot of people that would be happy to see that at North. Likes right now, obviously, like, the programs are great. I had a good time. I was kind of all over the place, obviously. I was in athletics, I was doing just like various clubs, and I was in theater, and like kind of doing all of that led me to like see like, okay, this is kind of what it's like across the board. And generally it's good. I had a good time. Other likes. I have a lot, but I just can't think of them right now. If
I
that
know I
makes
put you
sense.
on the
If
spot,
that
but
makes
thank
sense.
you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Thank you very much for taking the time to be here this evening and sharing with us. You are making an impact in our community, for sure.
Thank you.
Yes, have a great evening.
You too.
All right, we do not have anyone that has signed up to visit with us this evening from the audience, so we'll move on to staff reports, and I don't see anyone here from the FEA. We'll go to item B, Marzano Evaluation Report, and Doug Andring, you are taking this. Welcome to the podium.
Thank you. That's tough to follow, that reason, but we're going to try. So we're going to talk a little bit about our teacher evaluation system here at Fargo Public Schools. It was a system I was really unfamiliar with when I started, so I've learned a lot over the last month. Dr. Gross has helped me immensely in learning this. So let's take a look at what we're doing here. The purpose of a teacher evaluation system. We have our EL6, our staff evaluation, our strategic initiative, but really, the ultimate purpose of our teacher evaluation system is to improve teaching and learning. But what EL staff evaluation says, will administer an evaluation system for licensed or certified personnel that measures employee performance in terms of achieving the board's results policies. And then again stated in our strategic initiative 6, our equitable resources and planning goal for our teacher and administrator evaluation system. Fargo Public Schools will implement a framework for teacher and principal performance appraisals that are based on research-supported instructional technologies, strategies, and consistent in application. And then the evaluation system will provide valid and reliable measures of teacher and principal performance. Indicators of success. So that would be a percentage of completed teacher and administrator growth plans, and then percentage of teachers in level 3 applying, and then level 4 innovating in our Marzano model, and we'll look at what those definitions look like, and then our annual report to the Board of Education. Administrative Policy 5130, that's evaluating teacher performance. So it is Fargo Public Schools' goal that our evaluation system will do these things here. It'll be based on multiple approved contacts, including classroom observations. It'll utilize instruments which promote open, constructive communication, recognize diverse teaching styles, provide specific feedback, define a prescription for growth as needed, and then provide supervised response to the evaluation. We'll ensure that in-service programming and resources required by the growth plan are reasonable and designate the supervisor responsible for carrying out the evaluation process. We'll require training for supervisors to help ensure quality and uniformity of supervision. It'll be implemented with consistency in all departments and buildings, and then we'll follow due process principles. Other procedures for formal evaluation. So 2 performance reviews are conducted of each individual employed as a teacher during each of their first 3 years that the individual holds a teaching position. And then after that, if an individual begins employment after January 1st, one review is conducted. Beginning with the 4th year of employment, at least one performance review is conducted each year. And then evaluation is based on performance reviews that are based on classroom or other programming observations. For example, the evaluator may focus on 7 or 8 elements during an observation, and then coaching would occur on those elements as the observation happens. And then any observations or elements that are deemed to be a level 0 or 1, so again, beginning or not using, follow-up observations would be conducted at that point. And then our Every Student Succeeds Act, reporting on teacher effectiveness. So up here, what is an excellent educator? So high-quality educators who guide and support all students in getting and remaining on track to graduate from high school. Determinator of educator effectiveness. Educator effectiveness will be determined by the number of students, number of teachers evaluated on the teacher evaluation model, and then the number of elements and components rated during the year. And then finally, the number of ratings on level within the teacher evaluation model. And what that does is it gives us our calculation to determine ineffective teaching practices. Collecting data on ineffective teachers is required by ESSA, and in North Dakota, we report in aggregate data. We don't report in separate teacher data, but we aggregate it. So I get that out of each of the buildings, look at the district data, and then I report that into the Department of Public Instruction. And that is used to look at, rather than ineffective teachers, we look at effective and ineffective teaching as a whole. The NDPI did begin collecting this data through our STARS system in the fall of 2017. And then those teacher evaluations results were based on the 16-17 school year. So I just got done submitting the 18-19 data into there, and that's due June 30th of every year. And then school administrators prepare to input their data, but again, that's the Human Resources Office. I input that data on ineffective teaching by assuring that all teacher evaluations are completed using their approved teacher evaluation model. And again, for us, that's the Marzano 2011 model. There is a I believe it's a 2017 model that have updated some of the elements. It's not something we've looked at, but something that's going to be on my list to look at and see where we need to go with that. The data required for inputting into the SARS system is as follows. There's a teacher evaluation model used, so again, Marzano for us. Number of teachers evaluated per school, and then the number of level 1 ratings overall for the school, so beginning and level 0 if applicable. For reporting purposes to the state, I include level 0 in with all level 1 ratings, so they're lumped together and I submit them that way. Number of level 2 ratings overall, developing, number of level 3 ratings overall for the school applying, and then finally, number of level 4 ratings overall for the school, which is the innovating. And then what we see up here now are the different domains. So the 4 domains directly tied to student achievement. This is domain 1, and most of our elements that are rated on are located in domain 1. And that's represented in this slide. This contains 41 of our 60 elements that teachers are rated on and focuses specifically on classroom strategies and behaviors. It addresses what teachers do in the classroom. So DQ, that refers to a design question in the Marzano Art and Science of Teaching framework. The 9 DQs organize these 41 elements in domain 1. And then the final design question, DQ10, is developing effective lessons organized into a cohesive unit that's contained in domain 2, planning and preparing. And then what we see up here are the rest of the domains, 2, planning and preparing, 3, reflecting on teaching, and then finally 4, collegiality and professionalism. So again, domain 2, we're going to focus on planning and preparing for units of instruction and lessons within units. Domain 3, addresses deliberate practice. It encourages teacher self-reflection in the areas of evaluating personal performance and developing and implementing a professional growth plan. And then finally, domain 4 addresses collegiality and professionalism. It is the backdrop for the other domains and encourages a supportive culture. It also supports teacher participation in lesson study, instructional rounds, teacher-led professional development, and then professional learning communities. So for the 18-19 rating year, all 4 domains were open for review for our elementary, middle, and high school campuses. And then elementary schools specifically focus their ratings in domain 1 and those 41 elements. And then finally, the last slide, these are the actual results reported in. So on the left-hand side, my left, you can see the 17-18 results. So the total ratings, there was 6,648. This last year, or this current year, we had 7,031 ratings. There were 951 teachers that were evaluated using this classroom teacher evaluation model. One stat that isn't up here that I found interesting, we do have 60 elements. There's 951 teachers, so we do have a possibility for slightly over 57,000 ratings of elements. But this year there was 7,031 based on the principals and what they wanted to rate on this year. You can see the vast majority, total level 4 in innovating and total level 3 applying. About 87% of our ratings were within level 3 and 4. And then level 2 developing 11%, and then total level 1 and total level 0 was about 1.01%. And again, level 1 and 0 for reporting into the state, those are grouped together, so it was about 1.01%. So there are certain teaching positions that are not rated or are not reported in. Those use the Marzano non-classroom evaluation tool, so such as counselors, school psychologists, facilitators, and then student performance strategists. So that is the presentation, and I'd be happy to try and answer any questions that you have.
All right, thank you very much. John, you have a question?
What percentage of our teachers are within their first 4 years of teaching?
That I don't have specifically, and I don't know if you know that number. It's something I'd have to look up. I don't. Yep.
Could follow up with that information. Robin?
So this is, we use a program quality assessment. It might, not nearly as elaborate as this. We use external evaluators. So are you evaluators who you just mentioned, the counselors and strategists, or who are your evaluators, and do you do any outside evaluation techniques?
So the evaluators would be our principals or their designee that would
Okay.
do the observations and then the final evaluation. I'm not sure if we employ an outside evaluator model. I'm seeing no, so,
Okay.
yeah, but it would be their principal or their designee that would do that.
Thank you.
Jennifer?
You mentioned that, I think there were 5 categories, performance strategists, counselors, et cetera, are not reviewed on the current Marzano model. Is there another model, or what does that look like for those positions?
So to clear that up, they're rated within the Marzano model, and there's specific elements that are taken out that aren't specific to classroom teaching, since those groups of employees don't teach in a classroom, and then they're rated on that. So it's still within the Marzano model, but the classroom teaching components are removed out. Yep.
David?
Excuse me, Doug, how does the principal or their designee collect the information? Face-to-face or from evaluating lesson plans, or how is it done?
Most of the data is going to be collected through the observations, and there might be many of those throughout the year. They're going to fill it out and I might need a little bit more of assistance with the technicalities of that, but it's going to be their own personal classroom observations. They're going to choose some elements to look at. and rate and then follow up on those elements. And then at the end of the year, put that data into our eye observation for the overall reports that I pull out and then report into the state.
Dr. Gross, you'd like to add a little?
And that would be collected during both formal evaluations where the staff person knows in advance where there will be a pre-conference, and then they know at what time the principal or designee will come into the classroom. Some will be done through informal evaluations for a shorter period of time, and some actually through walkthroughs. So it varies from duration, and based upon that, if it's a longer period of time, more elements are reviewed. If it's a shorter period of time, they'll be more laser focused on one or two of those elements. And that's why, as we look at the number of elements that have been rated, you cannot just take every element multiplied by a number of staff, because the duration and number of evaluations is different from staff to staff.
Thank you for that. Brandy?
So if there is a concern or complaint with somebody who's an administrator, and does that go into the eval, or is that something separately that is completely taken out of the eval process?
So are you saying like if a teacher has a concern with an evaluation or how they were rated or something like that?
Correct that, or if there is a concern about, the teacher doing what they're doing, is that into the evaluation, or how is that?
And I may need a little bit more help as far as what all goes in there, but if there's a concern on the teacher, it would be placed into maybe I'll let you take that one.
I think two aspects to that. If a staff person disagrees with the evaluation that has been given to them, they have the opportunity to sit down with that administrator. They also have the opportunity to put in writing their reflections on that lesson or the feedback, so that would be one. The other is if there is consistent areas of concern from a building principal, that's where that might rise to the level of an improvement plan, where that goes beyond the evaluation, but then we will sit down, or the principal will sit down and create a specific improvement plan for that staff member.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Missy?
I guess I just like to add that one of the things I think is very strong is the strengths, and that they're very emphasized by our administrators about the strengths, and it's also a lot of questions. I see that administrators are posing questions back, and then when the staff member gets a chance to review, they will accept them in various ways, whether it's a face-to-face discussion about the questions or if they want to write back their answers, because we also know that an observation is a snapshot, and we need to collect those pieces over time. And so usually it comes down to the strengths and what are some things we can improve on to make it about growth.
Robin?
One follow-up to that. So is there any self-review component of in the Marzano model?
Dr. Gross?
There is, as the teachers at the beginning of the year are part of their growth plan development, they actually look at areas at which they may ask the principal to focus in. The principals then might say, as a building, we're going to focus in on these elements. So it is a conversation in which both members are part of that process.
Jennifer?
But just to clarify, because I think that's a great question, is there a field where they are allowed to write about their own performance?
Yes, there is. We use the Marzano evaluation matrix, or a series of matrix, can be used independently. We also use a tool called eye observation, in which all of that data is collected, and that's where principals can add information and staff can add information.
Anyone else? Thank you very much. Good, thorough information.
For helping.
All right, moving on to the mobility report, memo 111. Dr. Gross is making his way to the podium for that one.
Well, thank you very much. In front of you on the board and in your packet is the mobility report for last school year. We've been doing this for the past 3 to 4 years, in which around February or so, we do the first half of the mobility report, and then about this time of year, we provide you the entire set of data so that we get a sense of the number of students who have entered or who have exited the district over the course of the school year. Most of this is due to families and personal choices that they are making, either to employment or other reasons why they may come to the Fargo Public Schools or move to another district. This data just compiles all of that for you. So as you look at this report on the page 2, I'll just draw your attention to the chart that's there. This is the data that is from August 23rd, 2018 through May 30th, 2019. And the piece of data that's in the front of that, or in the middle, gives you this year's information broken down by grade band, so elementary, middle school, and high school. And then also gives you a point of reference to last school year, so that you can see what type of trend we had in the Fargo Public Schools. So the first 2 columns are the transfer in. You can see from elementary through high school, there were about 916 students over that course of the year came to the Fargo Public Schools. And that far set of 2 columns on the far right, you'll see about 1,170 students exited the Fargo Public Schools. In both cases, that is fewer than the year previous, but still a very large number. When we think of those 2 together, that's almost 2,000 students who changed desks, changed classrooms over the course of the school year. We are a very mobile district. Then below that is that same set of data, just in a graphic format, so that you can see by grade band, elementary, middle school, and high school, and then the total of both transferring in and transferring out of the district. And then, like we have in the past, we wanted to provide for you a little bit more detail of those who transferred in and out by grade band. We have not put numbers to these, but percentages, because in some instances the number is so small, in fact less than 10, and if we put a number we might be able to identify a student or a group of students. But you can see percentages of where the students who come to us in that first graph, from private school going around that pie graph to out of the state. And in the case of students coming to us, the largest percentage came from out of state, not Minnesota or North Dakota at the elementary level. And then you have that same color scheme and that same set of data for where the students at the elementary went if they happen to leave the Fargo Public Schools. And you can see from private school all the way around to out of the state, not including Minnesota and North Dakota. The reason we don't include Minnesota and North Dakota is because the other pieces of the pie give a little bit more detail. Is it Moorhead? Is it West Fargo? Is it the state of Minnesota? Is it the state of North Dakota? Just for your information. And then the second to the last page in this report provides that same breakdown for our students in middle school. So you can see where they came to us from last school year and where they went to if their family moved out of the Fargo Public Schools. And then lastly, we have that same 2 sets of data for high school age students as well. Students who transferred into the Fargo Public Schools and the percentages of where they came from. And if the students then exited the Fargo Public Schools, where they went to. This data does not include transfers within the district. So a student who may go from one elementary on the south side of Fargo to an elementary on the north side of Fargo, or so on, that is not included in any of these pieces of the data. This is just information on students who and families who either entered or exited the Fargo Public Schools last school year.
Robin and then Jennifer.
So as a mother myself, it makes sense that there's the elementary age is more mobile, because until you settle into your jobs and what have you. But I would be very interested, and you kind of mentioned it, on page 3, some of the demographics and the populations within this mobility would be very interesting for me as a board member, whether they are low income, English language learners. I think that would tell us a lot about our jobs, workforce here as well. So if that's possible to drill down in that, this board member would appreciate that information.
That is certainly something that we can add in future reports.
Thank you.
Jennifer?
In addition to that, is it possible, or do you have the data that breaks it down by school?
I don't have that with me tonight, but all of this data was compiled from our student information system. So we would have that by school, the same way we would have it by free and reduced lunch status, EL status, and so on. So we would be able to get that, yes.
So Jennifer, are you, we're maybe making some ideas in terms of how we might want to, or make some suggestions for deepening the information in the report is kind of what I'm hearing now. Jim, you had your hand up, I believe?
Yeah, and Bob, I know you like to look at data and try to figure out what it's telling us. What jumped off the page at me was the differential between high school and the other two, secondary, or, well, middle school and elementary, on the transfer outs. 65% of the high school students that transferred out left the area completely. But that is double either of the other categories. Any logic behind that you can see?
That is an anomaly from the years in the past. So to me, what that means is we need to ask a few more questions that we haven't been able to. It may be that we, as we look at our exit surveys or our senior surveys, we add some questions or actually look for ways to get back to students who have left us to ask those questions. It's difficult once they leave us to get the answers to some of those questions.
But I just thought those percentages would be parallel.
Right.
You know, so weird data.
David and then Robin.
I was thinking the same thing. It doesn't seem like, I mean, if it were a family transferring out, you'd think it'd be more even. But my question is, where do dropouts figure into this pie chart? Could that be part of the large issue?
The data here is only the students who've left, and we know that they're going and have enrolled in another school system. So the students who have dropped out are not part of this information. We do share that information when we talk about graduation rates and dropout rates. This is just mobility in and out of the district.
And this is, we know, you know this information in terms of where they've transferred to, because we've had to send, or administration has had to send the records to the new school. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, David, did you have a follow-up?
Yeah, just a follow-up. Then if we're not counting in dropouts, then that 1,170 number would actually be quite a bit. I mean, what, 100 bigger than that? The kids that aren't in the school system by the end of the year?
Yes, if we included both the transfer outs and those who have dropped out, that number would certainly increase, yes.
Robin?
So I've watched these reports and analyzed them several years. I don't ever see that much of a difference in our mobility rates. Is there any certain trends that stand out for you? They've been very consistent ever since I've been on the board.
And I would agree. The thing I do look at, though, is the difference between the 2 years. It is about 250 students fewer who transferred in, and about 250 some students who transferred out. So the percentages are similar. It's just a larger number in both categories. Again, transferring in has a lot to do with what is available in our community when it comes to workforce development and opportunities like that. Transfer out, many times it's families who are moving for work-related opportunities as well. So it would be hard for me to say this is the reason. It's just that those percentages, or they are close, if you factor out that number on both ends.
Follow-up comment. I think what you're saying is what I'm thinking. Education usually isn't the reason people transfer in or out. It has to do with workforce and family mobility more than anything. Agreed.
John?
I'd just like to second the request for demographic information, school-level information, if there's any internal data between schools for that. When these families are exiting, do we have an opportunity to survey them? Or is it only when we get a request from another school district for their information that we realize that they're no longer with us? Would there be an opportunity to ask them, why are you leaving?
I would say in some instances, we would be able to do that. Sometimes we know in advance when a family is going to be moving. Other times, it is a surprise even for the schools when a family may be no longer there. And it's not until we then get the request for records that we know actually where they may be attending next. So we wouldn't be able to ask that of all of our students who exit the system.
And then I was wondering, and I totally lost my train of thought with that question, sorry. I'll have to follow up with you later.
Okay.
Totally lost it, sorry.
Does anyone else have a question? And that might help John remember his. Jennifer?
Maybe a breakdown per grade level? Were you going down that path? No. Didn't help?
You were trying to read his mind?
Yes, I
Okay.
was trying.
Did you have a question? in
Well, I
addition?
actually was going to ask that. I'm not sure if that's helpful information or not, so I was sort of hesitating, but I thought maybe that would help you remember where you were going, but I would assume that we have that type of information as well.
We do. The one wonder I have is even on some of the charts as we look at the entire grade band at elementary, there are some pieces of that pie that are so small that we only have percentages because I want to be very careful that we don't identify a family or a student. And when we begin to break it down to that fine of detail and present, we'll have to be very careful how we present that so we don't identify a family or a student.
May I ask a follow-up specifically to really high school, I guess, as well, since that seems to be the larger number that we're talking about? Would we have the same issue, or could you leave the small number as a percent?
I think it will definitely help that we have 3 high schools as opposed to the number of elementaries we have. So if we do break it down by building, most likely the cell size will be large enough that we would not have to worry so much.
John?
I remembered. So, I believe it was just our last meeting, we saw the impact, and we heard from you the impact mobility has on proficiency and growth of our students, and that it's very negative. The longer somebody's staying with our district, the better they're going to do with us. If they move internally or they move externally, it really hurts their education. We know that here. Is any of that communicated out to our students, out to our parents, that, hey, if you can stick it out, your students will do better? Or is there anything we can do beyond assuming that this is a societal thing to try and make an impact?
We do present this data in our annual plan or what we share to our public and to our community. I think most of the choices that a family makes is based upon economics and where their jobs lead them, either to our community or out of our community. Certainly, we want our students to stay with us as long as they possibly can. We have the benefit of that extended education period. So I guess publicly I would say that's a wonderful thing, but again, still if a family needs to move because that's where their job is taking them, that's what they need to do because that's best for them.
Thank you.
Missy?
I think one of the pieces that we do a good job with is with the homeless population that we have in Fargo, that they've really have us connect with families to say, what can we do to help you stay at your home, your school of origin? And so that allows us to maybe pick someone up who is living in West Fargo now temporarily and keep them at their home school. So there are a few pieces that we're able to be very supportive when a situation gets to that level. Again, to minimize the amount of moves that child will have.
Well, thank you. We have had a really rich discussion regarding this report, and it looks like and it sounds like there's an opportunity for some, again, considerations for some additional information to be included. So we'll we'll give that project to you and see what you come back with next time for us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are we okay to continue? 6:25? Okay. On to the consent agenda. Is there a motion for approval? Robin,
I move to approve the consent agenda with the HR addendum.
and is there a second?
Second.
All right. There's been a motion by Robin, second by Brandy. All in favor signify by saying yes.
Yes.
Opposed? Motion passes. Business. Item A, bond sale memo 116. Jackie, would you like to take this for us?
Sure. I would like to note on the front of the memo, we do need to, I missed this today, I was in and out of meetings, so I didn't catch this with Jolynn. But on the face of the document, the actual amount is 18,475,000, not the 18,085,000. So just note, you'll see in the documents that follow it that the correct amount is there. That's what was issued. Myron Knutson, who typically comes and presents, is out of the state, I believe, or out of the area, and another staff member is out of the country, so this is the first time I get to talk about the results of a sale. So the bonds were sold today. There were 3 bids received. The winning bidder is Robert W. Baird and Company, Incorporated. The gross savings now are about $1.85 million in interest costs. We received a better interest rate than we even planned. It came in at 2.5% instead of 2.59, so that is good. In addition, what we did is the closing date on the bonds is July 10th, and they will actually then be paid off, let's say, on August 1st. So we are investing the proceeds in that time frame. So we're hoping may make around $15,000 to $20,000 in that time frame as well. And they ended up being sold for a premium, I believe. I have about 10 documents relating to this. So we got about $750,000 in a premium on the sale as well. So it turned out very well. And I guess would hope that we would approve this and sign the documents and save ourselves all of that money.
Thank you, Jackie, for that information. Is there a motion for moving forward? Jim?
I'd like to move that we adopt the resolution attached to memo 116, authorizing the establishment of the term of limited tax school building refunding bonds, series 2019.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Ani,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Rodenbiker,
Yes.
Ulrich,
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. North High Turf, memo 118. I see that we have 2 guests in the audience this evening. We have Mr. Dolan and Mr. Christensen here from Fargo North. Thanks for being here. Who would like to take this one? Christy?
I'd be happy to. Both Mr. Dolan and Mr. Christensen came to a planning meeting this past week. They've had the good fortune of having $1.2 million pledged to put in artificial turf. And one of the people who is contributing $300,000, they are doing it over a 5-year period. And so they are looking for us to approve their project under the guidelines that are listed in the memo 118.
All right, is there a motion for moving forward?
I would move that we approve the artificial turf project at North High under the guidelines outlined above in memo 118.
Second.
All right, there's been a motion by Christy, a second by Brian. Any discussion? And Mr. Dolan and Mr. Christensen, is there anything that you would like to add in at this time?
No, I think Christie laid it out very well and put in that memo. It's just
Thank you, Mr. Christensen. Thank you both for being here. Does anyone have questions? David?
Question for Jackie, where would we take the $300,000 from?
I haven't determined 100% on that yet. It'll be out of the general fund in the end, either through a transfer to student activities or just directly through the general fund. And then as the donor makes the payments back, we will, of course, recoup that money.
Any other questions? Jennifer?
Can that be then a transfer from the ending fund balance to activities?
The accounting for it doesn't work that way. But next year, potentially, we could factor in that $300,000 in a deficit to cover that payment coming in the following year.
Jennifer, do you have anything else? Okay, Robin?
Hence the reason for a fund balance. So, but it doesn't change your balance sheet because your pledges are considered.
Correct, we'll
Right.
book the pledge at the full $300,000 and just realize the money over the 5-year period. And it is from a donor that we know we will get the money from, so we don't have to worry about that either.
All right, if there are no more questions, Anne Marie, would you please call the roll?
Benson.
Yes.
Johnson.
Yes.
Brian Nelson.
Yes.
Robin Nelson.
Yes.
Paulson.
Yes?
Rodenbiker.
Yes.
Ulrich.
Yes.
Ani.
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. Exciting. Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. Nice work. City of Fargo TIF Pilot Applications Memo 119. I have Jackie on this one as well.
Sure, I said it's a busy night for me tonight. Usually I don't get to talk this much. We have discussed at planning, bringing forward the proposed projects with the city for them offering tax incentives to the developers. You'll see the reference to North Dakota Century Code in here where it was provided that anything over 5 years should come before the school board for their yay or nay on participating in that tax incentive. I would like to mention, I was at there was a joint meeting today with the Tax Exempt Committee and the Renaissance Zone Authority. We did go through these projects, but I would like to point out, Roars is still requesting the TIF. I have notes here. Some are now only Renaissance Zone, so they will not be requesting the pilot on it. And that would be for the Great Plains Mercantile Holding. That one will only be Renaissance Zone. And the Great Plains Holding LLC was approved by both of those committees for the Renaissance Zone for 5 years and a payment in lieu of taxes 10 years after that. And then the DFI Kessler right now has the pilot tabled. So I believe, if I remember correctly, they did receive approval on the Renaissance Zone, but unsure if they need that pilot. So just so you know, I mean, the directive here, or the recommendation is that the board either participate or not. So I'm not sure if you want to relay that information based on the group, because it has changed now. But it also could come back. It hasn't gone to the formal city commission yet, or the county commission either.
Jim?
I have a little problem with this motion, not a problem with what they're asking us, because the Century Code actually tells us to be silent unless we want to object. So part of me thinks we do nothing unless we want to specifically object to one of these and say, do not allow our mill levies to be withheld on that property. Because it specifically says if a county or school district elects to preclude the incentive from applying to its portion of property tax levied against the property, then we have to notify within 30 days. So I think as the recommended language here, I don't really see that we need to send a letter. I think we just need to either take action to say we're against these or take no action, period.
Thank you, Jim. Robin?
I agree. I have some questions about your voting authority on that board, because you're a representative of the board on that committee, and then I have a couple follow-up comments.
I am non-voting member.
A non-voting member. In the past, we've had developers actually come to and stand at that podium and ask us to endorse different tax incentives and tax breaks, and I still feel the same today as I did back then. I don't think that we need to be in the business of endorsing different businesses and different growths. We talk about the tax dollars and whether we oppose them or not, but we don't want to start approving individual projects, gang.
Brian and then Jennifer?
I'm not sure what's been done in the past, but you would think that that property, we would need those dollars to help do the things we do in the school district. But again, I don't know what's done in the past, and that would be nice to have some history there for me.
And Jackie, and we haven't had conversations like this at board meetings recently. Do you have some history on that?
Historically, the directive has been to not hinder public or city growth. What happens with these is the developer needs the tax incentive to make the project work. Once that comes off, that project significantly has a higher value. So in the long term, we are getting more money, but in the short term, we get less. These projects do continue to pay the amount of taxes that they are paying right now. It's just they don't pay on that increased amount until they run out. And they're on varying terms, some stagger down and some are longer term, so.
Jennifer, and then Robin, and then John.
Brian, I think that's also part of the discussion, to your point. Can the district afford to give up X amount of dollars every year for these projects, which is why I believe it's in state statute for us to take a position. And I don't know if you're reading from this century code in here, Jim, or if you're just saying that, because I don't see it, but.
It's on the memo.
Can we see the century code or and read it so that we know exactly what it says? And then I would also ask, since things have changed, that they're separate, that we don't take one vote on all of them together.
I believe I did copy the century code verbatim in the board memo.
So, and assuming that's the case, what Jim communicated is that it does indicate that unless we are going to say we're against it, well, it says that's when we would need to notify them.
And I would say, it's really an argument of whether or not the projects would be done with or without these kinds of incentives, if we believe that, right? And how much of a cost is it to the district? There are some things highlighted in our packet at the end of each project, right? That shows our current tax, what we would currently collect, and then after the TIF expired, what it would be then. Correct? But we don't have an overall dollar amount per year. And we know that, right, Jackie? Is it 200,000? Is it 500,000?
Well, it would vary depending on what everyone's levying as well. So there's nothing guaranteed as to what that amount would be.
But currently, do we know what it is? Or like
I believe
on
there's a
these
column on the information you got, a worksheet, I'm not sure which page it is, which shows what they're currently paying in taxes and then the difference going forward.
It's the last page of each one with the exception of the TIF. And I think it's really important to note, and Jackie clarified it, none of these projects will pay less money to Fargo Public Schools because this was approved. They'll all continue to pay at the same rate they are today, and then the new value will come online depending upon whether it's a Renaissance, a TIF, a pilot, under whatever schedule. And I tend to agree with Robin, unless we want to really change the nature of the development game and the nature of these school board meetings, we want to be very, very cautious. And not to say we should not from time to time look at a project and say, no, we're against that one. But to the extent we want to get vocal on every one of these, either yay or nay, we are inviting neighborhoods to come in and tell us why a project shouldn't happen. We're inviting contractors to come in and tell us why it should. And that really is the role of the planning commission and the city commission, not the school board, in my opinion.
Jennifer, and I do have a question, Anne Marie, I know this packet came to, I think it was addressed to the president, right? Was there a cover letter that indicated they were requesting a response from us? So if you could just, there wasn't?
Not requesting a response. They're pulling up a projector so I can project the century code so you can see it verbatim. Because if you would elect to not participate, there's more information here that I think you'd want to consider. I'll just take a second.
Okay, thank you.
Point of order. So I want to know how this got on the agenda, because I think that's what you're asking. And if we don't have to, I would prefer that this would just be in a report, and then we would take action. Because right now, we don't have any decorum on the floor because we don't have a motion on the floor. So we're asking questions, and we're not losing any tax dollars. So this is a philosophical conversation. I refuse to vote on individual projects.
So this came to our meeting via planning, and the information was sent to me, and then it was discussed at planning. So we may, if someone would like, to entertain a motion, and then there can be a second to that, and we can have additional conversation and figure out where we want to go with this. That is fine. Jim?
Yeah, I'm going to make a motion that we take no action regarding these 4 projects which have been sent to us in our 30-day window.
Second.
All right, there's been a motion and a second by Brian. Robin?
On this discussion, I think it would be important for the board to be updated on extended tax abatements or whatever they fall under. The new ones are different than the extended ones, and I have a concern with the extended ones.
And we are not notified when there will be, before the city commission, an extended project. We don't receive notification like we do on the new ones.
So can we request that? I think that would be a reasonable request.
I can
Jack?
check into that for you.
It's something that you could take?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Robin, is there anything else? Okay, John?
So just for my understanding, if somebody can clarify this, my understanding is that we receive our local property tax revenue as a specified mill levy of 126.5 or 127 mills. And we get that money whether or not any of these projects happen. What these projects do are they affect the tax base. And so they would affect everyone who is paying property taxes, how much more or less they would need to pay for that 126 mills to come to us. So if a project's done and it's suddenly 200% more valuable than it was before, we don't get any chunk of that additional property tax revenue. We'll still be getting our 126 mills worth of local property tax revenue. Is that correct?
Right, so while they're receiving the exemption, that's all factored into the overall tax base. And then eventually these stagger off, and they begin to pay more and more tax until they're paying on the full value of that tax. Does that help?
But we're still only going to get 126 mills.
At whatever that value is
Right.
determined to be with or without, with exempt property in there.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Jennifer,
So-
and then Brian?
Jackie, just a clarify, the value of the mill would essentially increase, meaning you potentially might need to levy fewer. Is that what you're saying? Once they come back online?
Potentially, because the value of the property keeps increasing. And then we would need to assess what that increase is going to be and what we require to operate.
Okay. One last question, if I may. Is every TIF set up in a way where you continue to collect the current tax rate, or are they all individually decided?
I believe they are set to, this is the first time I've actually seen one come forward. I believe they're all set to collect at the current rate.
Right.
Because what they're getting the exemption on is the increase in value over that time. then.
Okay. And I'm with Robin, I agree. I think the extended ones are definitely a request I would support as well.
Brian?
Thanks, Jackie. I'm clear on that now, and I agree with you, Jim. I don't think we want to be in that business of determining who's getting the breaks and whatever, and if we support it and this and that. But in terms of, don't get so much into how many mills are levied. Worry about the dollar amounts of money. That's most important. Mills are just a guide.
All right, any other discussion? Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes,
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Rodenbiker,
Yes.
Ulrich,
Yes.
Ani,
Yes.
Benson.
Can you repeat the motion, please?
I may not have it verbatim, but Jim moved to not take any action on the projects listed in the meeting packet.
So will it be deferred then back to planning, or just dies at the table, or that's just for later conversation, just to clarify?
There would be no more official action.
Taken on this?
This is it tonight, yes.
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes, motion passes. Okay, preliminary budget approval, memo 117. Christie, you gonna lead us off with this?
Hand it over to Jackie.
I was looking at you going, aren't you going to take this one?
Yeah, you're good at talking lately, so go ahead.
Yeah, you're going to get tired of hearing from you tonight. Attached are the budgets, preliminary budgets for approval. We have lots of time yet to where things will change as we close out the current year and figure out where we really ended up. The one thing to note is mills won't change. The only one that is, I think we need to consider increasing the mill on is the special assessments fund. We're not quite levying enough in there to cover what our costs are. And so we don't want to have a negative fund balance in that fund. Some highlights to note. So general fund, we will remain at 126.78 mils. Property tax revenue, we're using an estimate as of now of 4.8% on the value. And that's received from the assessor's department. I have built in, until I find the final ADM number, which is just about ready to roll, in 55 ADM units increase for enrollment. Our funding, next year will be based on what we ended up with this year for enrollment. And then, of course, there's the 2% increase to the per pupil payment as well. The other increase, so it's really, our revenue main sources, state aid and property taxes. So that kind of covers those two. As far as expenses, right now, it is built in at the 3% staff salary increase. Just an estimate as a placeholder so we can figure out where we're sitting. And then 4% for health, we have not received information on that. We will be doing an RFP for health insurance. It's just going to get in the paper next week probably, so we'll get some maybe more solid information on that. And I just plugged in a 3% for dental as well. So that kind of runs through the general fund. I don't know if you want me to go through these line by line or anything. I think that could be kind of time consuming, but if there's specific questions, do we want to go through by fund?
I think it would be okay to go through by fund if people have specific questions. Anyone on the general fund? All right. Building fund.
A building fund, so we will be, I'll have to do a little more accounting with this bond sale, kind of moving things in and out a little bit. It'll change some of the numbers, but overall, I think it will end up being fairly close to the same, as well as we'll be open yet for our fiscal year till about the middle to end of July, waiting for these contractors as well to get all of their work in progress bills to us on Discovery. That's the big one that is sitting out there, and then as well for the entrance projects that we have going on. So once we know where we ended up with that, I'll be able to project a little better on what our actual construction type expenses will be in that fund for next year. Stays at 15 mils, so no change there, same percentage increase in property revenue. I guess the other big thing there is, between that and the special levy fund, we just do a transfer. They're just two separate funds, but they'll be levied at the same mills. So if there's any questions on maybe either of those or the special assessments, they all kind of roll together.
It doesn't look like it right now, so why don't you continue on?
All right, and then we have Nutrition Services Fund, which we have as well factored in the 5% or 5 cent lunch account increase or lunch price increase for next year, and then sticking with the same estimate for salaries and benefit increases. Everything else in that fund is kind of running as normal and not really anticipating anything major. The last big piece that they have out of that fund, which I think we will have by the end of June here, is the new equipment that goes in the kitchen at Discovery and the lunchroom. So not anticipating that this fund would have any large expenditures relating to that in the next year.
Jennifer.
Thanks, Jackie. I have a question on the Nutrition Services Fund. I don't remember at planning talking about a deficit in that budget, and so maybe you could elaborate as to what's happening there?
Right, this is the same one that was presented at planning. The fund is only supposed to have 3 months of operating expenditures in it, so we do try to actually use that. We can balance it between the transfer that occurs between the general fund and the nutrition services fund. But she does need to work at getting her balance down. So she is looking at buying some equipment or start to do some replacement planning on existing equipment that's kind of nearing the end of its useful life to get that balance down a little bit.
Jennifer and then Robin.
Can follow up. So if she needs to spend her ending fund balance, the 3-month sort of
Correct.
balance, why would we take it to a deficit spend?
That's the only way she will utilize her fund balance is with a deficit. Otherwise, if she has net income, she'll be adding to her fund balance. If we have a zero balance, which is we try for sometimes,
Yeah.
she wouldn't have any change to it. The only way you can decrease your fund balance is to have a loss to deficit spend.
I have just one moment, Jackie. Do you feel like you've walked through the memo and shared the information you've intended to share?
Correct.
Okay, if we could have a motion and then go from there, then we can have additional conversation, please. Jennifer?
Before a motion, can I ask that they be divided so we vote on them individually? Or can that be part of the motion?
I think that you can make that motion.
So moved. Can I do that?
Robin?
So at planning, is there any discussion, I want to talk a little bit about ending fund.
Oh, actually, I think we need a second on that. So
Second.
Jennifer, would you like to state your motion and then Anne Marie can have that in the
She's
minutes,
just dividing the
please?
question.
Yeah, just
you-
dividing the question.
You have the information you need, Anne Marie?
But has someone made the motion to approve the budgets to divide them?
You can just divide the question, you don't need a motion.
Yeah, we don't have a motion on the floor to divide.
Okay, I'll second.
Okay, Robin is seconded. Thank you. We can have discussion now.
Excuse me,
Well,
I don't think you have a motion.
we don't have a motion on the floor to divide.
Sorry
So I
here
need
if I'm
for
not
somebody
quite
to
following, right.
either move approval of the budgets per the recommendation, or just move to approve them individually, either one.
Yeah.
if someone would like to do
Yeah.
that to get us started, I would be happy to entertain that. Jim?
I'm going to move that we approve the general fund budget as provided in our packet.
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that? Robin?
So at planning, how much have you discussed ending fund balances? Because obviously there is a little bit of misunderstanding about ending fund balances. And the reason that we have an ending fund balances is for cash flow. And our goal is to have that between 15 and 25%, correct? That also helps with bonds and ratings and what have you. Of course, we can't cross those dollars over to building funds unless it's a building authority approval. So has there been any discussion to spend that fund balance down, which would require a deficit budget that the board can approve? That's our prerogative to do.
Jackie?
Administration was directed by planning to balance the general fund budget
Okay.
for 2020.
Okay, but it's clear, I want to make sure everybody's clear, that it is the board's authority to approve a deficit budget by majority. We have that authority to do that. And that's the only way you can spend down a fund balance.
Yes, you're correct, Robin. Thank you. Jennifer?
So then, on that note, right, the board asked for a balanced budget. Doesn't that then apply to every building fund, special assessment fund, special levy, as well as nutrition?
If that was the intention, I did not interpret it that way.
Christie?
This is also a preliminary budget. There's a lot more that will come in before the middle of July. So it's just approving this preliminary. The full budget will come back to us at a later time for us to approve. Correct.
Any other discussion? Brian?
And we also have till October 10th to make amendments and changes and things like that as well. So, I mean, it's, to me, there's a lot of work in progress here. And I thought we were talking, I'm listening closely here, I thought we were talking about the nutrition fund and that one going backwards because of the operational costs you can't have more than 3 months, correct? And
Correct.
that's why we were wanting to bring that down. And it was correct, wasn't it, the federal government that said we had to increase 5 cents?
Yes, there's a minimum that has to go through.
Find that interesting, that the federal government says we need to have a 5 cent increase, but yet it's healthy balance, and it's interesting.
Jim, you have a comment?
The motion on the floor is the general fund, so could we just have questions on that right now, or comments? We're going to get to these other ones, too.
David?
Jackie, I have a question on the first page of the general fund draft. On the bottom for expenditures, you're estimating that administrative expenses will increase 15.68%, is that correct?
From budget to budget, yes. Not comparing actual for the current year to what we're budgeting for next year. It's comparing what we budgeted last year to what we're anticipating budgeting this year, because we haven't closed the year yet.
Right. And 5.3 for teachers.
Correct.
And I only bring this up because I've discussed this with Dr. Gandhi, and it bothers me greatly. I think that Doug pointed out that evaluations were done on something like 950 teachers this year. So we're basically projecting that 950 teachers and their benefits is going to utilize about $2.8 million, and 2.8 million additional. And the administrators are going to have about 40% of that for a greatly reduced number from 950. It bothers me that we continue to add we're adding to the top, and the people that are actually in the classroom with the students aren't seeing it happen. I've spoken with Dr. Gandhi on this on a couple of occasions, and I just want to make sure that you people know where I stand on this.
Any other discussion? Christie?
One of the things that was added to the administration line are the dean of students that were in the intern program before. And so it's moving them from the teachers to the dean of students, which will be helping with those students, so that the teachers can stay in the classroom rather than being disrupted and pulled out.
Jennifer?
So I would actually agree with many of those comments that David made, and it reminds me of it takes me back to, was it 4 years ago now? We did the standard of effort report, or the administration did. And I'm just curious, as a board, we haven't brought that forward to discuss again or to request any initial or any additional analysis since that time in terms of how does this district compare to others, or are there other ways that we could be, are there other positions that we should be considering outside of just adding to management and those folks that are not currently in the classroom?
So where we are right now is, this is a preliminary approval motion, and it needs to be filed to the county auditor by August 10th. So we need to decide this evening if we're going to grant that preliminary approval for the budget that must be filed. So I see that is the main discussion that we need to be having this evening, not that the items that you and David mentioned aren't important, but we still need to be able to decide if we're going to approve this preliminary budget. Robin?
I hope that we vote after my comment, but I guess what I would say, this is a great topic to bring to governance for a discussion, a standard of efforts discussion at our summer retreat. RUPOC sent out the standard of efforts last Friday, I believe, and so the ratios are very intriguing to me. There's a lot of employees that have been reclassed, is what it sounds like, and that's pretty common in business. So for us to have an understanding of that might be a nice report for that retreat. But tonight, I agree, we're getting in the weeds.
And I'll take note of that for our governance committee meeting Thursday. John?
I have a question on the last page of the general, oh, I'm sorry, it was the wrong fund, sorry. I'll hold it, we're just talking about general fund.
Okay, it sounds like there's no more discussion. We could vote on the general fund. Anne Marie?
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Paulson. Yes. Rodenbacher,
Yes.
Ulrich,
Yes.
Ani,
Yes.
Benson,
No.
Johnson,
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. Jim?
And I'd like to move adoption of the building fund as provided in our packet.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second. Any discussion? No discussion. Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Robin Nelson,
Yes.
Paulson,
Yes.
Rodenbacher,
Yes.
Ulrich,
Yes.
Ani,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Knutson.
Yes, motion passes. Jim?
I'd like to move adoption of the special assessment fund as provided in our packet.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second regarding the special assessments fund. Any discussion? John?
Okay, so this is the one that we adjust every once in a while because we only want this to be reflective of what we really need to pay for special assessments. And as we're looking at this, we're seeing that next year we're looking at not having enough revenue. And so that's why we are increasing this to cover those additional costs.
Correct. We have one remaining tax payment to come in from the city, and so I'm hoping that that's enough to negate the deficit that we currently have in this fund as of this point. That will come in next month
So then we'll record that back. We have all the expenses in here already. We've taken that fund down to nothing, and so we need to make sure that we're levying enough to cover what we have.
Jackie, thank you for that. Jennifer, question?
So a clarifying question, you mentioned earlier, Jackie, I know, right? And I think I caught this correctly, but did you say the special assessment fund and the building fund can be shared or
The
interchanged?
special levy
Special levy?
and the building fund.
Okay,
But special assessments really is standalone. We don't transfer between or anything on those. And we're allowed to levy what we need in that fund.
but those funds then cannot, so at a deficit, say we need more money in that fund, you can't take them from the ending fund balance of a general fund, you can't take them from the, yes, you can? Okay,
So then I would be bringing a transfer forward
a transfer.
to you to approve if we end up negative this year in this fund.
Okay, so I would just state that's probably my preference, since we have a pretty healthy ending fund balance.
Any other discussion? Anne Marie, please call. Oh, Brian, did you have? Sorry.
I would caution the ending fund balance, the healthiness of it, depending on what we're going to do this next year as well. So, in terms of what we decide, in future programs, that we've talked about this year. So, I'm gonna think of that as well.
Thank you, Brian. Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Paulson,
Yes.
Rodenbiker,
Yes.
Ulrich,
Yes.
Ani,
Yes.
Benson,
You make a great point, Brian. I'm still gonna say no.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson. Yes. Knutson,
Yes, motion passes. Jim?
I'd like to move that we adopt the special levy fund as provided in our board packet.
Is there a second?
Second.
So motion by Jim, second by John. Any discussion on the special levy fund? All right, Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Rodenbiker,
Yes.
Ulrich,
Yes.
Ani,
Yes.
Benson,
Yes,
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson. Yes. Paulson,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes, motion passes. Jim?
I'd like to move adoption of the nutrition services fund as provided in our packet.
Is there a second?
Second.
So motion and a second by John. Any discussion? Okay, Anne Marie, please call the roll.
Ulrich,
Yes.
Ani,
Yes.
Benson,
no.
Johnson,
Yes.
Brian Nelson,
Yes.
Robin Nelson. Yes. Paulson,
Yes.
Rodenbiker,
Yes.
Knutson,
Yes, motion passes. On to board reports, committee liaison and correspondence reports. David, we'll start with you.
I have nothing to report at this time.
All right, Jennifer.
I don't think I do either. We haven't had a committee meeting since the last meeting, so we're, nothing to report.
John.
The canvassing committee is doing its work, and I would ask that the members report back to me by the end of the day tomorrow, so we can get that all organized and to our secretary for our next board meeting, reorganization.
Thank you, John. Robin.
Nothing to report.
Brian.
I have nothing to report other than to thank everybody for the first year of being a board member. It was a lot of fun, a lot of fun. It's great to work with all of you, and the amount of information one acquires. I think I have a stack this much from everything. But thank you for the first year.
Thank you for being with us. Brandy.
Nothing to report.
Christy.
We had a planning committee meeting, and I also attended the FPS Foundation Board meeting this last week.
Jim?
In addition to planning, we had a state school board association board meeting retreat, actually this last weekend and yesterday. Approved a new budget. The one big highlight that I want to point out to all board members, we should be getting sometime this week, maybe next week, a survey request coming out from the North Dakota State School Boards Association. It's actually for the CTE consortium. Perkins 5 is the new CTE federal funding program, and part of what states have to do is get feedback from stakeholders, and not just K-12 education groups, stakeholders, community, business, everybody. So you're going to get a survey request sent out to you. I'm assuming it'll come from the North Dakota State School Boards Association. Please take the time to take the survey. They're hoping to get at least a 60% response rate from all the different groups they're going to, because there's some kind of cut score on the federal level that they have to show they're really doing the community engagement through that process. So keep your eye out, open for that if you would. And that's it.
All right.
One last thing. August 8th is really coming rapidly.
How are we doing with door prizes so far? Anne Marie?
None have been submitted to me as of yet.
There's room for improvement then, right? Good deal. All right, the report has been handed out, the president's report. Governance meets Thursday at 7:30 a.m. There's a rather lengthy agenda, I feel, so hopefully we'll be able to get through everything. There might be the one item, the last item on the agenda that we might not be able to get to. We'll see how the conversation goes for the rest. And then we have our work session at 8 a.m., July 11th at South High, room C30. So I believe everyone had responded saying they'd be able to attend that time frame. So hopefully that, you have that on your calendar, and let Anne Marie know if that changes. And I attended planning last week as well. So I thank you all for being here this evening, and see some of you Thursday. Have a good night. We're adjourned. Unless. We are officially adjourned. Thank you.